So, in the audio community, there are various sub-communities, and one of them is Sonic Getaway. The point of this server is to solicit people into buying terrible headphones using their affiliate links. For example, trash like the HiFiMan HE400 SE, Edition XS, and Ananda. So after my video confirming that inverted polarity is in fact audible, the quote-unquote science guy in their server, Arostis, claims to have disproven that inverted polarity is audible, at least with planar magnetic headphones, which is completely false, by the way. I find it funny that Arostis is the leader of the frequency response doesn't matter much, but measurements matter, gang. Yet, he is essentially using the frequency response being the same as his entire argument for why inverted polarity is not audible. Okay, so he inverted the polarity of the HE400 SE, and aside from some deviations in the bass, I'm assuming just because he rewired the headphones and remeasured them, there was some variance, but it measures pretty much the same. Okay, yes, I know this. This is something that's obvious. Then he also posts the impulse responses for the positive and negative. One thing that doesn't make sense about this is that the negative impulse is supposed to start by moving in the opposite direction. That's what happens with inverted polarity. Here's the positive SPL in phase. This makes sense. But when we come down to the negative phase, this doesn't make sense since everything is supposed to be shifted 180 degrees when polarity is inverted. Okay, so take, for example, the Tin Hi-Fi P1 Max. Differences in driver tech actually have nothing to do with the audibility of inverted polarity, but to humor him, I used the Tin Hi-Fi P1 Max, which is a planar magnetic earphone, as you can clearly see, and I measured it once with inverted polarity. As we can see, the excess phase is pretty much 180 degrees before rising more in higher frequencies. Oh yeah, one thing to keep in mind is that this phase response alone isn't that important. You should compare it versus the minimum phase response, which is what would be the ideal phase response calculated directly from the magnitude response, which is the blue line you see here. Anyways, so the deviations of the actual phase versus the minimum phase are the excess phase. And measured with correct polarity, the only difference we can see is that the phase gets dropped down 180 degrees so that it's 0 degrees, and that the excess phase is also just shifted down 180 degrees. The minimum phase does not change. Okay, and here's the difference in the magnitude responses between both. As you can see, this is obviously an inaudible difference if we're going by a magnitude response alone, at least nothing close to what could be attributed to the warbling effect in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind soundtrack Il Vento d'Oro. Okay, so he says across all different driver types, there's minimal difference, but ESTAT show the most. Okay, so this is just a bunch of bullshit yet again. Wayne, to know if you want to pin so people can just hop back to this all but. It's really funny how people like me who actually know what they're talking about get banned from communities like this because we just absolutely destroy the status quo that they have built. The server really could not survive with someone like me in it telling them what actually is truth and what is not. So he says the differences are extremely minimal, and if anyone can ABX it on actual music, I'd be surprised. So he thinks that the magnitude response is what tells the whole story here, but as I clearly demonstrated, the phase response is being shifted 180 degrees when you invert the polarity. And to get into the science of this, let's turn to a blog post made by Archimago in 2019. An easy way to ABX inverted versus correct polarity is by using a sawtooth file shown here. Since the signals are identical other than polarity inversion, the FFT shows that the signals contain the same frequencies whether in the initial orientation or inverted. FFT stands for fast Fourier transform. So if we look at the oppo comparing the inverted versus correct polarity files, we can see that there is no distortion from the stack amp. And Archimago was easily able to pass this test, 16 out of 16, with a perfect DAC amp, and just like the headphones RSDs measured or even I measured, if you just invert the polarity, the magnitude response of the HT800 would be identical, only the phase response would be shifted 180 degrees. To quote Archimago, I looked into what we understand about the mammalian hearing mechanism, and indeed, it looks like the mechanico-electrical sound transduction with the release of neurotransmitters from the cochlear hair cells is directional in nature. Positive deviation of the hair cells will open primarily potassium and calcium channels, whereas negative deviation closes those channels. This results in a half-wave rectification effect in our hearing mechanism. Polarity of the basilar membrane deviation in the cochlea will move the hair cells, trigger action potentials that induces neurotransmission, which is glutamose release and stimulation of postsynaptic AMPA receptors. I don't really know what that means, in one direction. In this PowerPoint slide goes over what exactly is happening. On a positive impulse, your eardrum is being pushed. On a negative impulse, your eardrum is being pulled, which is why it sounds different. Anyways, I'm going to blind test this on the P1 Max and get back to you. As you can see right there, extremely easy, 10 out of 10 performance with 99.9% confidence interval. I don't know why some people are not able to hear this. Maybe it has to do with brain processing power or something. Everyone who has been able to pass this test is someone I consider generally pretty smart. Just make your brain work faster and you'll be able to detect the difference really easily. This was not a hard test at all. So yeah, make sure not to trust people like Wayne and RSTs who are just after your money. I actually care about you guys, which is why when I realize I've made a mistake, I don't double down. I'm only interested in the truth. Be sure to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. I'm out. I'd like to give a shout out to the ROFL Reaper, Tripped, Fofo, Straight Up Benchech, Moonalos, Ninjacoma 3, Hunter Bungay, Vsauce 4, Wadeacre, and Snivery. Thank you guys for supporting the channel. I really appreciate it. If you also want to support the channel, please be sure to join the Patreon link down in the description, the YouTube membership, or even the Discord membership. Be sure to also join the Apple House Sound Discord server link below.